The more you delve into profound thoughts, the more you may find yourself distanced from others, and the more knowledge you gain, the less eager people seem to engage in your insights. Whenever a large group of people gathers, the inevitable consequence is chaos. Even if one desires peace, the collective noise of the crowd finds its way in. Society, in its essence, is a reflection of the noise that arises when minds are not attuned to deeper things. For as long as history has been recorded, those who think profoundly have always been met with resistance, not because their ideas were wrong, but because they illuminated truths others were not ready to face. From the days of Socrates to Nietzsche, and from Galileo to Tesla, brilliant minds were often met with scorn or indifference. The resistance wasn't because of their lack of intellect, but because their insights unsettled the status quo. Schopenhauer, known for his brutal honesty, once remarked that intelligence could be a curse, one that isolates those who see the world more clearly than others. But why does society react this way? Why does it resist those whose thoughts go deeper than the common conversation? The answer lies in the nature of human psychology. Think about it. When you encounter someone who is physically strong, you may admire them, but rarely do you feel personally threatened by their strength. Likewise, if you meet someone wealthier than you may feel a twinge of envy, but there's no deep-seated discomfort. But when confronted with someone intellectually superior, something different happens. There's a subtle tension, almost an instinctual discomfort. This phenomenon is often referred to by psychologists as the mirror effect. A deep thinker doesn't just offer new ideas, they reflect back to others their own limitations. The mere presence of someone who thinks deeply can make others feel inadequate, even if the thinker says nothing at all. The discomfort isn't born of malice, but of the self-awareness that arises when one is confronted with their own lack of understanding. But why does this happen? Why does intellectual superiority provoke such discomfort, more than wealth or physical strength ever could? To understand this, we need to look at how we process different forms of superiority. Physical strength, for example, is admired because it often implies leadership or protection. Wealth is respected because it represents success, a goal many aspire to. Strength, wealth, and beauty are external attributes that can be recognized and appreciated without challenging our identity. Intelligence, however, operates on a different level, is deeply tied to our sense of self. We define ourselves not just by what we own or how we look, but by what we understand, how we think, and how we perceive the world around us. When we meet someone who challenges our thinking, someone who questions our assumptions or highlights the flaws in our understanding, it feels like an attack on our very identity. Instead of admiring intelligence, many resist it. Not because the person is arrogant or dismissive, but because their very presence forces others to face their own limitations. This discomfort explains why, throughout history, deep thinkers have often been pushed to the fringes of society. Their ideas don't just challenge existing beliefs, they challenge egos. And it is in our nature to protect our egos, to avoid the discomfort that arises when we are forced to acknowledge our own ignorance. Consider your own experiences. Have you ever introduced a complex idea or questioned a popular belief in a conversation, only to be met with silence or awkwardness? Have you noticed how discussions tend to shift quickly when they veer into deeper or more challenging territory? This is the subtle and often unconscious resistance to confronting the discomfort of our own intellectual limitations. We, as humans, are constantly navigating between our desire for growth and our need to preserve our sense of self. The deep thinkers, the ones who challenge the boundaries of our understanding, are often the ones who push us to grow, not by force, but by forcing us to reckon with our own assumptions. And it is this reckoning, uncomfortable as it may be, that ultimately allows for transformation and progress. This is no mere coincidence. It is, in fact, a protective mechanism inherent in human nature. When confronted by someone with profound thoughts, the human mind instinctively shifts into defense mode. Instead of feeling curiosity or embracing the opportunity to engage, people often choose resistance. Rather than participating in thoughtful dialogue, they dismiss the deep thinker's ideas. This is why intellectuals, philosophers, and visionaries frequently find themselves in solitude. It is not because they desire isolation, but because society, in its own way, pushes them to the periphery. Society often favors comfort over discomfort, and challenging the familiar is seen as threatening. Surprisingly, studies indicate that in social settings, confidence tends to be more highly valued than intelligence. People naturally gravitate toward those who radiate certainty, even when their ideas are shallow or unfounded. A person who speaks with force, yet offers little substance, often garners more influence than someone who presents complex, nuanced ideas that require deeper reflection. This dynamic explains why charismatic individuals, populist leaders, motivational speakers, and viral influencers often thrive. They provide reassurance rather than provoke thought. Their appeal lies in confirming what others want to believe, rather than challenging them to think critically. Meanwhile, those who question widely accepted beliefs and provoke deeper thought often struggle to reach a broad audience. This represents the paradox of intelligence. The more one seeks truth, the more they may find themselves isolated from the majority. The so-called mirror effect not only reflects society's limitations, but also sheds light on why change is often met with resistance in the first place. Society, by nature, resists disruptions to its established norms, especially those that challenge its core beliefs. But the question arises, if intelligence is such a threat, is there scientific evidence supporting this idea? Modern neuroscience provides validation. Research shows that when individuals feel intellectually inferior, their brain's amygdala, the region associated with fear and threat detection, becomes highly active. Essentially, deep thinking does not merely intimidate. It triggers a primal response, akin to the one we experience when faced with physical danger. Why does the presence of intellectual superiority evoke this fear response? The answer lies in the evolutionary history of human beings. For much of human history, survival was not about being the smartest person, but rather about being accepted within a group. Our ancestors lived in tribes, where social harmony was crucial for survival. Rejection from the group meant isolation, and isolation often led to death. This survival mechanism has wired human brains to prioritize social acceptance over intellectual pursuits. When a person who embodies intelligence enters a social setting, they unknowingly disrupt the tribe's balance. Their presence challenges existing ideas, social norms, and the very dynamics that the group relies on for cohesion. This triggers the brain's defense mechanism, as though we're facing a threat, rather than simply encountering someone with different thoughts. This is why many deep thinkers find themselves isolated, not due to a lack of social skills, but because their intelligence stands out in a world that prioritizes conformity over individuality. A 2021 study from Stanford University further underscores this point. The study revealed that the perception of deep thinkers is often context-dependent. When people engage with intellectuals one-on-one, they tend to feel less threatened. However, in group settings, the brain's threat response is significantly heightened. Why is this the case? In group dynamics, social status becomes more important. People do not only react to intelligence itself, they react to how others perceive them in relation to the intellectual. When someone feels overshadowed by a deep thinker, their instinct is to undermine or exclude that individual, protecting their own social standing. This fascinating interplay between intelligence, social acceptance, and survival instinct helps explain why deep thinkers often find themselves on the outside. Their very presence challenges the delicate balance of social conformity, triggering defense mechanisms that make others feel threatened, even when there is no intention to attack. This explains why deep thinkers may find more meaningful conversations in private, intimate settings, yet struggle to engage in larger social environments. When in a crowd, their thoughts often go unappreciated or misunderstood. The dynamics at play here can be understood through various psychological frameworks. One of the key cognitive biases that explains this resistance to intelligence is the Dunning-Kruger effect. This phenomenon occurs when people with limited knowledge or ability tend to overestimate their intelligence, while those with deeper understanding often feel insecure and doubt themselves. This imbalance leads to friction. The less someone knows, the more likely they are to dismiss those with deeper insights, believing they already possess all the answers. Another bias at play is the status quo bias. Humans, by nature, prefer familiar ideas over unfamiliar, complex truths. Deep thinkers often challenge established norms and introduce disruptive ideas that make people uncomfortable, forcing them to reconsider long-held beliefs. This discomfort, though necessary for growth, is met with resistance by many. The backfire effect further explains the rejection of intelligence. When confronted with information that challenges their beliefs, many individuals do not adjust their views. Instead, they become more entrenched in their existing beliefs. This is often the reaction faced by deep thinkers when they present ideas that contradict the accepted narrative. Instead of embracing these new perspectives, people double down on their current worldview, protecting their ego from the discomfort of change. In today's digital age, this resistance to intelligence has become even more pronounced. Social media platforms, with their algorithms that prioritize engagement over substance, have amplified the rejection of thoughtful discourse. Emotional, sensational content spreads far more quickly than nuanced, well-reasoned arguments. Simple, catchy soundbites are far more likely to go viral than the deep, complex ideas that deep thinkers might share. This trend further compounds the struggle for intellectuals. Their ability to express complex thoughts in concise, attention-grabbing formats is often limited, making it difficult for their ideas to resonate in the fast-paced world of viral media. The result is a society that values entertainment and emotional stimulation over intellectual depth, which in turn makes it even harder for deep thinkers to gain widespread acceptance. What does this tell us about society's preference? It's clear that society gravitates toward comfort. People favor predictability and emotional satisfaction over the sometimes uncomfortable truth. This preference is not just social, but rooted in human nature. As Schopenhauer, one of the most brutally honest philosophers, pointed out, intelligence is not always a gift, but often a curse. While many thinkers see intelligence as the path to success, Schopenhauer argued that the more intelligent someone is, the more they are likely to struggle with connecting to society. Why is this the case? Schopenhauer's philosophy centers on the concept of the will, a blind, irrational force driving all human behavior. For most people, the will to live prevails. They seek pleasure, comfort, and survival. However, highly intelligent individuals tend to operate differently. They develop what Schopenhauer called the will to truth, a relentless desire to understand reality, no matter how uncomfortable or painful that truth might be. Whereas the majority of people are driven by the need for comfort, avoiding difficult truths, and seeking pleasure in relationships, entertainment, and routine activities, deep thinkers push beyond this. They seek understanding, even when it leads to discomfort, isolation, and a sense of alienation. This creates a fundamental disconnection between intellectuals and the wider society, as most people find meaning in simple, everyday pleasures, while deep thinkers are preoccupied with exploring deeper, often existential questions that others avoid. In this sense, intelligence becomes a burden rather than a blessing. It isolates the individual, forcing them to confront uncomfortable truths that others choose to ignore. This is the nature of deep thought. It is not always a path to greater acceptance, but often a road to personal solitude. But in embracing this solitude, deep thinkers not only gain clarity, but also a deeper understanding of themselves and the world around them. Schopenhauer posited that the more a person understands the intricacies of human nature, the more difficult it becomes for them to connect with others. As their awareness sharpens, they become acutely aware of the lies and deceptions that permeate everyday life. Most social exchanges revolve around trivial pleasantries, power struggles, and the kind of polite dishonesty that helps maintain societal harmony. For deep thinkers who hold truth in higher regard than appearances, this shallow interaction is hard to engage with. They yearn for depth, yet the world favors simplicity and surface-level exchanges. While the majority of people are content with casual conversations and routine interactions, deep thinkers crave meaningful dialogue, discussions that explore ideas and uncover truth. This disconnect often leaves them feeling bored or alienated, as they cannot connect with the trivialities that dominate their social spheres. For them, it is difficult to find satisfaction in the typical ambitions that drive most people: money, power, and social relationships. These desires, Schopenhauer argued, are illusions, empty pursuits that distract from the deeper questions of existence. It is precisely this questioning of worldly pursuits that sets deep thinkers apart, making them appear indifferent or distant to the passions that excite the masses. The more intelligent a person becomes, the more isolated they may feel, for their awareness of life's flaws deepens. Schopenhauer equated intelligence with a heightened awareness, a gift that, in reality, may feel like a curse. The more you understand, the less you can ignore. The more you see, the harder it is to find joy in a world rife with imperfections. The deeper your thoughts, the lonelier you become. Schopenhauer believed that intelligence and happiness were inversely related. The more one knows, the harder it is to experience true contentment. For him, ignorance was not only bliss, but also the key to happiness. This paradox has been evident throughout history, as many deep thinkers, Nietzsche, Pascal, Kafka, struggled with depression, existential crises, and profound social isolation. Schopenhauer, however, did not simply diagnose the problem. He also offered a way forward. While intelligence often leads to solitude, he believed deep thinkers could cope with their isolation by embracing it. Solitude, for Schopenhauer, was not a curse but a privilege. He encouraged deep thinkers to use their time alone for intellectual and creative pursuits, not for seeking validation from a society that might not understand them. Instead of forcing themselves into a world that might reject them, Schopenhauer advised intelligent individuals to seek like-minded people, whether through literature, philosophy, or exclusive intellectual circles. He also emphasized the importance of engaging with the world wisely. Rather than sharing their insights indiscriminately, deep thinkers should observe society, learn its rhythms, and choose their words carefully. Schopenhauer believed that thoughtful reflection and measured speech were crucial when dealing with those unprepared to accept complex ideas. By engaging selectively, deep thinkers could preserve their peace while still contributing meaningfully to the world around them. Schopenhauer's philosophy serves as a guide for modern deep thinkers who face the challenges of social rejection. While intelligence may lead to isolation, it also grants freedom and profound wisdom. It allows one to see reality clearly, though this clarity often distances them from those who prefer to live in comfortable illusions. Schopenhauer understood intelligence as a double-edged sword, both a source of power and pain. In the end, his teachings remind us that the more we understand, the more we must come to terms with our solitude and the complexities of existence. Society does not inherently fear intelligence, but rather, it fears the truths that intelligence unveils. Deep thinkers are not rejected for their incorrectness, but for being too right, often ahead of their time. If you have ever felt isolated in your thoughts, rest assured, you're not broken. You are simply seeing the world as it truly is, beyond the veil of comfort and convenience. But does this mean that deep thinkers are doomed to isolation? Or is there a way to navigate the world while maintaining intellectual depth? The reality is that society is not structured to embrace those who think profoundly. Instead, it is designed to maintain stability, to uphold the status quo. Most people gravitate toward comfort, not truth. This is why shallow conversations, oversimplified ideas, and repetitive content dominate the social landscape, overshadowing deeper, more nuanced discussions. Why is it that comfort takes precedence over intellectual depth? Why does society resist change, even when it leads to growth and progress? The answer lies in the way our minds are wired and how our societal institutions condition us from an early age. At the core of human psychology is a deep-seated craving for certainty and predictability. Evolution has hardwired us to avoid mental discomfort, a phenomenon psychologists have labeled cognitive ease. Our brains prefer simple, familiar information because it is easier to process, requiring less mental energy. When confronted with ideas that are complex, unfamiliar, or nuanced, our brains perceive them as difficult or even dangerous. This psychological tendency to favor comfort over complexity can also be explained by system justification theory. People often defend the existing system, even when it works against their own interests, because questioning authority or outdated beliefs feels too unsettling. The ease of accepting familiar ideas outweighs the discomfort of exploring new ones. Similarly, groupthink leads people to conform to widely accepted beliefs to avoid the social rejection that challenging those beliefs might bring. As a result, intellectual dissent is frequently rejected, even when it holds a kernel of truth. This preference for comfort over complexity is a key reason why intellectuals, philosophers, and scientists often struggle to gain widespread acceptance, especially in their lifetimes. Now, in the digital age, this dynamic is even more pronounced. Consider the world of social media. Who garners the most attention? It's rarely the intellectuals or deep thinkers. Rather, it is those who are skilled at boiling down complex ideas into simple, viral sound bites. Thought-provoking discussions, those requiring time and effort to digest, often fail to gain traction. Viral content, on the other hand, thrives because it is quick, emotional, and easy to consume. Algorithms reward engagement, and nothing engages people more than controversy, outrage, or humor, emotions that often overshadow rational discourse. Echo chambers develop, creating environments where people are exposed only to information that confirms their existing beliefs. As a result, deep thinkers who challenge the mainstream narrative find themselves ignored, misunderstood, or even attacked. This rejection of intellectual depth is not confined to the digital world. It begins much earlier in life, within the institutions that shape our thinking. Education systems, workplaces, and societal structures are all designed to uphold the status quo, teaching us to conform rather than to question, to fit in rather than to stand out. This is where the seeds of intellectual resistance are planted, and the struggle for deep thinkers to find acceptance begins. Schools claim to value intelligence, but in truth, they often reward conformity over independent thought. The system praises students who memorize and repeat information, while those who question, challenge authority, or think critically are often labeled as troublemakers. The real value lies not in curiosity and discovery, but in following the prescribed path. This pattern extends beyond the classroom, into the workplace. In corporate settings, the most intelligent or innovative employees are not always the ones who rise to the top. Rather, it's those who fit into the established culture, who preserve the existing power structure, and who maintain the status quo. The same holds true in the political arena, where leaders who make bold, logical, and often unpopular statements are overshadowed by those who offer the comfort of promises that align with people's desires. This explains why the most celebrated intellectuals in history were often outcast during their lifetimes. Their groundbreaking ideas, instead of being recognized as valuable, were often dismissed as disruptive. Society claims to value intelligence, creativity, and critical thinking, but in reality, it only celebrates these traits once they have been widely accepted and no longer pose a threat. Consider the examples of Galileo, Van Gogh, and Nikola Tesla. Galileo, who uncovered the truth about the Earth's position in the solar system, was imprisoned for challenging long-held religious beliefs. His ideas were seen as a threat to the established order, and it wasn't until much later that society acknowledged his genius. Van Gogh died penniless, his art undervalued in his time. Yet today his paintings are worth millions. Nikola Tesla revolutionized energy, yet he spent much of his life in obscurity, overshadowed by others who benefited from his innovations. These examples reveal a harsh truth. Society does not embrace intelligence when it challenges the norm. It only celebrates it once the danger of that challenge has passed, when the ideas are no longer threatening. So if deep thinkers are often rejected, what can they do? If you have ever felt misunderstood or out of place because of your intellectual depth, know that you are not alone. Throughout history, some of the most brilliant minds were ignored, ridiculed, or persecuted for their ideas. These thinkers were ahead of their time, and because of that, they suffered for their wisdom. Take Socrates, for example. He spent his life questioning accepted beliefs, encouraging people to think critically, and embracing logic over blind tradition. Rather than being lauded for his insight, he was put on trial for corrupting the youth and disrespecting the gods. His real crime was challenging people to think for themselves. Socrates, despite being offered an escape, chose death over abandoning his principles. His famous declaration, "The unexamined life is not worth living," remains a powerful reminder of the price that is often paid for truth. Galileo's story further illustrates the resistance intellectuals face. His only crime was discovering the truth about the Earth's place in the cosmos. His challenge to centuries of religious dogma led to him being branded a heretic. Despite proving an undeniable fact, he was forced to recant under threat of torture, and his work was suppressed for years. Galileo's story shows that even irrefutable truths will be rejected when they challenge the existing power structure. The lives of these thinkers remind us of a simple but powerful truth. Intelligence, when it challenges the status quo, is not embraced, it is feared. But that fear is not a reflection of the intellect itself. It is the fear of change, the discomfort of confronting deeply held beliefs, and the anxiety of confronting the unknown. Nietzsche's ideas were once deemed too radical, too unsettling for his time. He challenged the very foundation of traditional morality, arguing that society was built on comforting lies. According to him, true strength came not from adhering to the accepted values, but from the creation of one's own values, shaped through individual will and self-determination. These views were simply too much for the majority to handle. At the time, Nietzsche was dismissed as insane, and his works were either misunderstood or ignored. Yet as time passed, his philosophy found fertile ground, influencing psychology, literature, and existentialism, shaping modern thought. His theories on power, will, and morality have left an indelible mark on philosophy, illustrating how society often rejects revolutionary thinkers in their time, only to embrace them as their ideas gain wider acceptance in the future. Take Tesla, a visionary far ahead of his era. He dreamed of providing free, wireless energy to the world, ideas that could have completely transformed human civilization. Yet, his vision threatened the existing power structures, especially industrialists like Thomas Edison and J.P. Morgan, who stood to lose profit from the sale of electricity. Tesla's revolutionary ideas were stifled, his dreams pushed aside in favor of financial interests. Despite his brilliance, Tesla died in obscurity, alone and impoverished, while those who took credit for his innovations amassed fortunes. His life serves as a poignant reminder of how society often rewards businessmen and marketers over true visionaries. Similarly, Alan Turing's work in cryptography was instrumental in ending World War II. His ability to crack the German Enigma code saved millions of lives and laid the groundwork for modern computing and artificial intelligence. Yet, instead of being celebrated, Turing was persecuted for his sexuality. In 1952, he was chemically castrated for being gay, a cruel punishment that led to his tragic suicide at the age of 41. Today, he is hailed as a hero, but during his time, society discarded him despite his monumental contributions to human progress. Historically, most deep thinkers have been men, but Hypatia of Alexandria stands out as an exception. She was a philosopher, mathematician, and astronomer who challenged the male-dominated intellectual circles of ancient Rome. Her advocacy for scientific reasoning and rational thought put her at odds with religious authorities, leading to her brutal murder in 415 by a mob of religious extremists. Hypatia's death underscores a painful historical truth. Intellectual progress is often met with violent resistance. Each of these thinkers shared a tragic fate. They introduced ideas that were ahead of their time, and as a result, they were ridiculed, rejected, or punished during their lives. Yet, the very ideas they presented later became the foundation of human progress. This pattern reveals a fundamental truth. Society does not fear intelligence itself, but rather, it fears what intelligence represents: change, disruption, and the challenge to the established order. So, if history shows that society resists deep thinkers, what does that mean for you if you consider yourself one of them? Does this mean that deep thinkers are condemned to a life of isolation and loneliness? Not necessarily. It simply means that you must learn how to navigate the world wisely. Not every person or situation is ready for the depth of thought you carry. Sometimes, it's best to save your most profound ideas for those who truly appreciate and seek them. By choosing the right moments and audiences for your insights, you can continue to thrive without becoming discouraged by those who are not ready to understand. You don't need to be understood by millions. You only need to find the right people. Seek those who share your way of thinking, whether through books, online communities, or intellectual circles. True understanding comes not from the masses, but from the few who can truly grasp your perspective. Some of the greatest thinkers in history knew how to make complex ideas comprehensible. Einstein once remarked, "If you can't explain it simply, you don't understand it well enough." This is a reminder that clarity in communication is just as crucial as the depth of thought itself. Schopenhauer also emphasized this point, advising that we learn to express our depth without overwhelming others. His words, "Talent hits a target no one else can hit. Genius hits a target no one else can see," perfectly capture the essence of a deep thinker. Those who think deeply often perceive the world in ways that make others uncomfortable, but that does not mean their thoughts are any less valuable. Society may not always know how to embrace deep thinkers, but it desperately needs them. If you've ever felt like an outsider for your thoughts or ideas, know that you're not alone. The discomfort you sometimes feel from others is a reflection of their inability to see what you see, not a flaw in your thinking. Throughout history, it is the deep thinkers, the ones who are often misunderstood or even rejected in their time, that have been the true catalyst for progress. They're the ones who challenge the status quo, who push humanity forward. So while society may sometimes fear those who think deeply, it is precisely those individuals who change the world. If this message resonates with you, I invite you to share your thoughts in the comments below. Have you ever faced rejection for thinking differently? Let's start a conversation. And if you're interested in exploring more insights from some of history's greatest minds, don't forget to hit the subscribe button. The journey of understanding is just beginning.